Kuza Jamii is an economic inclusion program, which is part of the components that we have in the Kenya Socio-Economic Inclusion Program. So this is a program that targets the extremely poor households. These are the people that the Kuza Jamii project intends to graduate them from extreme poverty. The Kuza Jamii projects want to graduate them from being extremely poor to a point where they are now self-reliant.
At the core of the program is a graduation component. Under the graduation methodology, we partner cash transfer with other interventions. We have the training component that provides the skills, expertise, and the knowledge for participants to be resilient, to exercise judgment, to be resourceful within the community. We also support them to form village savings and lending associations. We also support them through mentorship over a period of time. But beyond that, of the core essentials of being sustainable at the household level and also at the community level.
Sisi wakati nyingi tunakuanga wafugaji. Hizi mambo na ukulima kidogo ikwangi yetu sana. Sasa vile walitufundisha wakatuambia tujaribu kubadilisha maisha kwa vitu zingine tofauti. Tukafikiria tukasema wacha hata sisi tuanze kujifundisha hii kazi ya ukulima.
First tumepata pesa, tukaenda soko, kununua tumerudisha tena soko. After wiki moja tumerudisha, tulipata faida. Ile faida tumepata nusu tunaweka mahali, nusu nyingine tunagawanya kupatia watoto ya school fees kama chakula, kama hospitali tunagawanya, na nyingine nusu tunaweka mahali. Imekuwa mingi kidogo, tumenunua ng'ombe.
We have noticed that there is a very big market outside the counties. Market owners do not know how to penetrate into these areas. So what we do is we matchmake. This, we have structured MOUs, and these MOUs make sure that the benefit goes back to the community.
The journey of transiting the Kuza Jamii from consortium partners to government leadership has taken different phases. In the first phase, the government was learning from the consortium. We took the consortium as the technical experts, and therefore the government was learning by doing. When we moved to Kuza Jamii 2, we now were working together because as government we had already attained the technical expertise from the consortium. Now it was an issue of leveraging on each other's strengths. We've been able to create structures, we've been able to synergize our programs, and we've been able to develop programs and documents together.
The government officers have been capacity built. We have a multi-sectoral approach whereby we have the county government and we also have the national government. Through that synergy, they have been trained and they know their roles because there are committees who are going to be handling everything from the community level up to the national level.
Economic inclusion, when partnered with government services and government structures and government resources, has been proven to work. My call to action is to encourage county governments and national governments to pay close attention to ultra-poor graduation strategies and to be able to implement them in their own communities.
So that is Kuza Jamii, and it is the bold plan to end poverty in the country. We want to talk a little bit more about that now with my guests here. Thank you very much for being with us tonight, Dr. Lynett Ochuma, who's the Acting Secretary at the State Department for Social Protection and Senior Citizens Affairs. That's at the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection. Asante Sana. Leah Okero is the Regional Director for Programs at Village Enterprise. And right next to her is Eduarda Mendonça-Gray, who's from the British High Commission, heading Resilience and Inclusion, and is also Deputy Development Director. Thank you very much. And last, certainly not least, Thomas Kongongo, thank you, Executive Director and Chief Technology and Performance Officer at BOMA. This is an interesting initiative. Perhaps the best place to begin with is you, Dr. Ochuma. Tell us about Kuza Jamii, what it is, and the role that it's playing in ensuring economic inclusion in the country.
Thank you, Yvonne. Kuza Jamii is an economic inclusion program that was started in Kenya in the year 2019. It was started on a pilot basis and we have scaled it up. So when you talk of Kuza Jamii, we are talking about graduating the extreme poor households from poverty and moving them to self-sustainability. When you look at extreme poor households in Kenya, you are talking of those households or individuals who are earning Kenya shillings 245 shillings per day. If you look at that, that is a very small amount of money. So what Kuza Jamii intends to do is to move them from that state of extreme poor to self-sustainability. So economic inclusion is a new thing in Kenya, and as I said, we started it in 2019 and we've been rolling it up in different phases. We started as a government on pilot basis where we went to 5 counties, and then after that we got a grant from the British High Commission, and that is where we initiated the Kuza Jamii project. So the Kuza Jamii is being implemented in partnership with the British High Commission being the sponsors, and then we have a consortium of Boma and Village Enterprise implementing and the government overseeing. So economic inclusion, what it does is that it targets the extremely poor households, and then it gives them as a consumption support of Kenya shillings 2,000 for a period of 12 months. That consumption support is meant to stabilize these households and give them, smoothen their consumption. And then there are mentors, individuals from that locality who are attached to those households, and they train them on business skills, entrepreneurship for a period of 3 months, and then the project gives them a seed capital of 30,000 shillings for them to be able to start a business. So other than that, we are saying that for you to develop their human capability and for you to explore all their capabilities, then what you need to do is you bring them together so that they can have peer-to-peer learning. So what we do is we group the participants in a group of 10 to 25, and then they form what we call the Village Saving and Loaning Association. So within the Village Saving and Loaning Association, the participants are able to get credit, they are able to get loans, and they are also able to learn from each other. So the enterprises that they select are contextualized within their locality, and that helps them in terms of sustainability. And other than that, then we have technical people who also they are linked to, who come and train them. And we have formed what we are calling the multisectoral committees. So the multisectoral committees have different experts who are attached, and they train them on the specialization based on the business that they have chosen. So if someone has chosen trade, then we will have the trade officer linked to that person to be able to train them on the technical bit of the enterprise that they have chosen. So Kuza Jamii is about targeting the poor households and mentoring them for a period of 12 months so that they can be able to start enterprises. And there's a lot that has been done to ensure that they are able to diversify the different businesses that they do.
Yeah, and it seems like this is a move away from handouts and investing in people. Eduarda, maybe you can tell us about why the British High Commission has chosen to support this initiative and use this approach rather than the typical handouts.
Thank you, Yvonne. Maybe I will start by saying that the British High Commission has a strategic partnership with the government of Kenya. And this strategic partnership focuses on green growth and investment, climate and nature, security and instability, and science and technology. That is our overall umbrella in terms of how we work with the Kenya government here. And we are very proud about this partnership. So in terms of Kuza Jamii, or EIP as we call it, actually it started by UK working alongside government to create what we call Hunger Safety Net program. I'm sure you have heard about this. This is where government actually provides cash transfer at the moment to 133,000 households in Kenya, particularly in the northeast. So what the UK working with the government and other partners, I'm glad that we have partners here on the table. What we did was, this is not sustainable to continue give these cash transfers without stopping. So how do we stop that? We stop that by empowering these households to become resilient. And that's what Dr. Lynett was explaining in terms of we need to provide them with safety nets, with investment capital, so that they can on their own invest and become self-sustainable. Yvonne, I will tell you, I've been in many counties in Kenya, and last week I was actually in Wajir, and I spoke with so many beneficiaries of this, and particularly women. The program actually benefits about 70% women, right? When I spoke with the women, they were telling me they're now able to provide food, at least 3 meals per day. They are able to send their children to school. They are able to take their children to hospital. For me, this is what it means, is actually providing this resilience. And we know that climate shocks are continuous. So what we want is create resilience so that people don't keep going back into poverty, but they continue investing more and more.
Right, and when it comes to implementation, Leah, how has this been delivered across, the different counties, and there's diverse communities as well, including refugee settlements?
Right, thank you, Yvonne. And this has been a very transformational program, especially knowing that it has been implemented in a very in thin markets in northern Kenya that are similar but also with differences. And it's interesting what has been very, that has stood out in terms of implementation is the collaboration, first of all, with the government of Kenya, because traditionally you find programs are implemented by non-profit organizations like ourselves without thinking about understanding the contexts and also the systems that exist within these communities that we work in. And so implementation was done in collaboration with the government of Kenya, the Directorate of Social Development, but also the county governments. And so this also worked very well by getting the direct implementers coming from these communities. We call them business mentors, who are the frontline workers to deliver this program, but working hand in hand with the government officials at the county level, at the sub-county level, all the way to the village level. And these are people who really understand the contextual issues of the community. For example, if you go to Marsabit, the context is very different from Isiolo, from Wajir, from Mandera, and the vulnerabilities are very different. So implementing alongside government officials who are already embedded there and working alongside for them to learn how this program is implemented. And I'm really excited that it's going to be taken up by the government of Kenya through the this Kenya Socio-Economic Inclusion Program. But of importance also is working with the private sector actors who are within that market system, because as we help these communities to start and run micro enterprises, they have to be anchored in a pathway that helps them to continue within that journey out of extreme poverty. And so we work with a number of private sector actors, including associations like Chemlink, and especially knowing that communities in northern Kenya mostly are pastoralists. And as you heard the women in the video say, that mostly they have been doing pastoralist activities and now moving into agricultural activities, taking advantage of different seasons. So what we have seen is that linking them to market actors, private sector actors, because they play a very critical role in sustaining the gains that we have realized with these communities. We work with financial service providers, we work with SACCOs and cooperatives that we have now channeled these communities or these micro enterprises into that. So that has really worked so well. But also standardizing this model, because as Dr. Lynett said, back in 2019, we had rigorous evidence that showed that this program actually worked. And so this was a transition program into government structures using the evidence, the rigorous evidence that it works, and contextualizing it or for different contexts so that it makes sense. It's not one size that fits all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, like we're now hearing this is through entrepreneurship and helping them start businesses and providing them the mentorship. So obviously, Thomas, you're dealing with some people who are first-time entrepreneurs. So what sort of support, you know, is needed or do you provide to help them succeed? Starting a business isn't easy, particularly in some of the challenging environments in which this program is anchored.
Yeah, thanks Yvonne. As you mentioned, these are first-time business, you know, people, and they live in very challenging environments. So in terms of getting them to start off, there are a number of things that we do. First, as Dr. Lynett has said, we have a very systematic targeting process to identify the participants, the ultra poor, so that we actually are helping the right people. And with that, we have used the government systems, the ESR, which is the Enhanced Single Registry, which is a registry of all you know, ultra poor people in different counties. I think almost all counties are represented. So that's where we start. And as again, Dr. Lynett has said, that targeting criteria also, you know, also, you know, focuses on those who received the stipend, those who are already getting some stipend. The first thing that we do is to train and give them confidence about their capacity to actually change and be businessmen and women. And as Eduarda has said, 70% of the population that we target are women, and some you know, young people, as well as you know, orphans and disabled, those living with disabilities. So after giving that level of confidence, we also do market assessment in their context. Because when you're starting a business, you need to establish which business, help them establish which business can work, which one won't work, and also to avoid concentration, because it is true also that in those localities, there are also businesses that are running as well. Mm-hmm. So there are people already with business. So you don't want to intensify the competition. Yeah. The second thing that we do is to give them training on business selection, and thereafter you give them cash transfer. The cash transfer would be based on the group. They will start the business as a group of 3 or 2. And the group dynamics, the group concept is a very significant concept, you know, in this model, because it enables pooling of resources, supporting one another, you know, to manage the business. And when the circumstances are unfavorable for one person, then another one will take off. So the business group then pool their resources, they start a business, and they go through a coaching process. As Leah said, we have locally, we have mentors that are trained to be coaches around life skills, around record keeping, and also marketing, how to situate your business to actually, you know, to work. And these people are within their localities. So they hold their hands as they you know, run their businesses, and they also help them to manage the group dynamics, because as groups there will be differences. There will be people who are not pulling their weight, and so on and so forth. So our mentors help them to address this through training and capacity building. We also do help them to be linked to to markets. It is true that the places are quite remote. And one of the significant problems is actually markets. They could have the products, but the cost of access, the cost of transport is very significant. And therefore, one of the things that we do is to establish linkages that help to reduce the risk and the cost of if it is a trade, then they are pulling, different businesses are pulling resources to have goods purchased from different places and to stock their shops. And then, of course, the other big activity that we do in the process is starting of the Village Savings and Loans Association that is composed of the business groups, 10 to 24 people, and they support one another. They save as a group. They pool those resources, and those resources can then make them bankable to the financial institutions in the formal sector. So that's the support that we grant. Eventually, we have a criteria that we look at of the graduation from where they were to where they end up, and hoping that the linkages established build sustainability even beyond the program duration.
Right, yeah. And because this is now a fully owned government initiative, Dr. Lynett, how does this Kuza Jamii complement other government initiatives and safety net programs?
Thank you, Yvonne. As I said, Kuza Jamii was actually started by the government, and we were learning from the consortium, and now we are fully taken it up. And I think it would be good to note that poverty reduction has been a development agenda for the government for a very long time, right from independence. When we gained independence, we developed the sessional paper number 10 of 1965, where the government committed that we wanted to eradicate poverty, disease, and ignorance. But when you look at poverty, it has been fluctuating. Currently, we are at 39.8%, and during COVID time, we went up to 42%. And there are a lot of disparities between different regions. If you go to Turkana, it is at 82%. So the government has come up with different initiatives, and one of the initiatives that we started as a government was the social protection programs. So we started with the orphans and vulnerable children in the year 2004, and we've been progressing now through the hunger safety net program, and we also have the national safety net programs that have the persons with severe disability, and we also have the older persons. So we've been giving them cash. And at some point now we said that cash is not enough. You need to make them to move beyond cash so that now they can actually participate. Because when they just receive the cash, then there's that feeling of dependency. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to make them to be self-reliant, and that's why we came up with the innovation of economic inclusion programming, where we are not even calling them beneficiaries, we are calling them participants, because we expect them to participate and work with us. So through the legislation that has been put, we have now moved from just cash to beyond cash. And what these complementary programs are doing is that you want to train them, the way you say you want to give them the net to be able to fish. So that's what we are doing. And they are the ones who identify the business that they want to do. It's not that we identify for them. So we'll go to that community, we will identify that poor and vulnerable person, and then take them through, and even the identification of the businesses is done through a transect walk. So we walk around with them so that they're able to see what is there in the market for them, and they select themselves. So it is very contextualized. So what we are doing is we are layering on already an existing program, which is the Hunger Safety Net program and the National Safety Net programs. We have been having the Kuza Jamii phase 1, and we did phase 2, and now we are moving into the Kenya Socio-Economic Inclusion Program phase 2. Now in this phase 2, we have lessons that we learned. We have best practices that we picked from phase 1, and one of the best practices that we learned is that they cannot do this alone, neither can the government do it alone. There is need for us to work with partners. And through Kuza Jamii, we've been able to work as a team where we brought in the government, we brought in a non-governmental organization, we brought in the private sector, and we are working very closely with the British High Commission and the World Bank. So if we leverage on that technical expertise and using again the government structures that are already existing through the Hunger Safety Net program, we already had management information systems that are being used in the Hunger Safety Net program as well as in the National Safety Net program. So we have our enhanced single registry that Thomas was talking about, which is a social registry that has a database of all the poor households in Kenya, and currently we have about 4.4 million households that are in that database. So when we want to target, even when the private sector want to target, then they don't need to collect data. They just go to the single registry and they will get a database of all the poor and vulnerable households. So we are using again the existing structures that were being used for the National Safety Net programs. Then we also have our community development management information system. This is where now we host the data for all the economic inclusion participants. So again, for the consortium, that is Village Enterprise and Boma, they have had to transfer their data to our government systems, so that now if I want to query who has benefited from which program and from which organization, then I can be able to query the community development management information system. And we are also using our platforms in the cash transfer, the consolidated cash transfer management information system for payment. We have now gone digital. Remember, we used to use the banks for paying the Kuza Jamii, but now we are transiting from using the banks, and now we are using the mobile platform. So there's that bit of also using digitalization of our services. So everything has been enhanced. So other than that, there are lessons that we learned, and one of them was that we can start a business, but because of the climatic shocks, then we may reverse the gains that we've had. So we've come up with the shock responsive programs. So under KSEP 2, we have a climate resilient economic inclusion program. So we will give you the asset transfer, we'll give you the consumption support, but we will want to link you again to facilitators who will be training you on early warning systems and how to develop climate resistant, the green enterprises that Eduarda was talking about. And we are also training our participants. You remember they were getting the 2,000 or the 2,700 and they consume all of it. So now we are training them into getting into the saving culture. So we have the economic resilient social insurance scheme in our KSEP 2, which is a replica of what we have in Nyota or Haba Haba. So that now we tell you, once you start business, the profit that you get, you can be able to save for long term. So it is a program that is just layering on the existing programs, and there is a lot of political goodwill in terms of steering this and scaling it up to other counties. So we had the 5 pilot counties, and then we moved to the 8 ASAL counties, and now we are moving to additional 20 counties. So we are scaling it up because of the great impact that it has had on you saw the stories that are there. So you'll move to the ASAL counties, and instead of the pictures that you always see on TV of people who are malnourished, they'll tell their stories what economic inclusion has been able to do in their lives.
Yeah, and this is about resilience and that economic inclusion, Eduarda. So how does this strengthen that?
So, as I said earlier, this is about actually giving people an opportunity to move beyond the basics, right? Lynett just explained, and I explained previously, that the cash transfers beneficiaries receive 2,700 shillings per month. Yeah. That is a consumption, let's be honest. Around here, can we live with that on a monthly basis? No. So resilience is about how do we then support these communities to move to something else. When we're talking about the Northeast, for example, we know families can be large, right? As I said to you, I was in Wajir last week, and the one lady that actually in a successful business selling bed mattress, chairs and all that, she told me she has 11 children. Right? So if you think about this lady with 11 children, she needs something to allow her children to go to school. And therefore, how do we provide an opportunity that goes beyond that cash transfer? I do want to speak about some of the results on this program, Yvonne. So we piloted this, the UK funded, and we piloted this, and I'm so delighted that now government is going to scale up to 20 counties. This is amazing. This is exactly what Kenya should be doing. And when we talk about Kenya being a regional hub, these are the kind of things that Kenya is doing that no one else in Africa is doing at the moment, right? So many African countries will be looking at Kenya to learn from this in terms of how do they replicate this in different countries. So I will tell you, for example, when we did the first pilot, we did an evaluation to actually assess the progress. And one of the data I want to share with you is that there was 17% of poverty graduation in 3 places. These are, let me get them right, I need to look at them, Kisumu, Taveta, and Mwatate. Now look at this, 17% of the population graduated, the beneficiaries obviously, graduated from poverty. I want to also use another statistic to illustrate this. So we know that business startups fail often, right? This is global, and we have data in Kenya as well. However, what we have seen in this program is that actually 25% of business were able to maintain beyond the program. So when I went back to Lodwar to see beneficiaries of the phase 1, I was so impressed to see that they actually scaling up and bringing the neighbors and friends into a larger scale of program. So that's what we speak about resilience. Let's be honest, if a shock happens in that community that I went to visit 2 weeks ago, if a shock comes, that family, that community has some kind of livelihood that will allow them to outstand that shock so that they don't just go back and rely completely on the cash transfers. That's what we mean about resilience. How do we provide incentives, process, institutions like government that actually can take beyond and the long-term sustainability options for households?
Yeah, and you know, talking about helping these entrepreneurs, first of all, access markets.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you talked about that, even the fact that they are in remote areas. Maybe, Thomas, you can help us understand how you're able to connect what we're now calling participants, not beneficiaries, you know, to markets and, you know, the role of the private sector and how this helps for the sustainability of this program.
Thank you, Yvonne. I think it's connecting or enabling this sustainability of these enterprises actually starts from the very beginning. And it's because we are talking about economic inclusion. Enterprises that are started, they are not just started to end. The intention is for them to run after, long after the program has ended. And the foundation of that is basically, in what we've seen is 2 things. One is market connection, and second is mindset. And the capacity that is built within the participants themselves. Because as Eduarda said, there will be shocks. But what takes somebody beyond the shock, in addition to the savings that they will have created, is actually the ability to pick themselves up and start something afresh. And there are many stories about that. So because we start with contextual analysis of what to start, one of the things that, the primary things that we do is to ensure that the businesses that these participants start are actually market-oriented. Because if you start a business that has got it's got a dead end from the start, then you can't grow it, then you can't find appropriate linkages. So beyond that, we use aggregation, because single businesses have got, if they're producing, or they have got animals, or they are producing beads, or they are in agriculture, they are too small to go out on their own. So what we do is, one of the things that we do is to enable them to aggregate, and that is through their village savings and loan scheme, so that they are able to pool. And when they do the pooling, you can attract bigger buyers, and you can also streamline, the quality that they are able to produce or to provide. And you saw in the video earlier that with this pooling, you can move the relationships from informal to formal structures. The second way that we do this, we link them to markets, is through cooperatives, the producer cooperatives, that also help in aggregation. But further than that, those cooperatives also have got structures that that they can be able to formalize the engagements that they have. And in addition to the market, we also do linkages to the financial institutions. And as I mentioned before, and it's been discussed here, one of the biggest pillars of this program is to promote savings. And those savings is through village savings and loaning schemes, where out of the profits of businesses, out of the stipends that they get, they put aside monies, and initially they are put in boxes. They're actually lockable boxes, and they are actually hard cash. We've gone to village savings that have got 100,000 stashed in boxes. And with this amount of money, we are able then to have banking institutions, come in and open accounts. We also register those village savings, groups with the government, so that they have got certificates that they can actually go and open group accounts if they need to, and also the individuals can have a track record of what they have saved, so that when they go to a banking institution, they have got, a statement that they can be able to provide. So through those mechanisms, we are not only providing markets to them, but also enabling them to support themselves from the loaning institutions that are formal, and giving themselves an opportunity to build their savings and the track record that can allow them to borrow more from those formal institutions.
Yeah, and everything that we're saying here is geared towards sustainability, and like you were saying, that these businesses go, long beyond this initiative, and whatever happens afterwards, that they're then able to stand on their own. So, Leah, how is this program then different from traditional intervention methods to ensure that long-term sustainability?
Yeah, that's a good question, Yvonne. I think the first thing is how the program is designed. Traditionally, you'd find such programs designed in the boardroom setup, and then they're implemented without having the end user in mind. And I think from what my colleagues here have said, this program has been designed with the end user in mind, understanding their vulnerabilities, the context in which they are in, that is very different, and who designs it. So this poverty graduation program, which is now being adopted by the government as the economic inclusion program, was first designed in Bangladesh as an ultra-poor poverty graduation program, and the organization I work for, Village Enterprise, contextualized it with other organizations similar to us, contextualized it for Africa, because the issues are very different. And even within Africa, when you go from one country to another, the issues are also different. So the design work of the poverty graduation program, and when we look at the data, a lot of randomized control trials have been done across different contexts. The delivery is very similar. There is the foundational delivery design and methodology, but also how do you contextualize in it for what works in Isiolo cannot work for Marsabit or Kisumu, as Dr. Lynett mentioned. And so this work has been, it was first of all tested to see whether it works, to get evidence. And then the second part is who delivers it. And so I think that's why we said we hire local mentors from the field who actually deliver the program. Then the third, what sets it apart is who finances it. Traditionally, you find such programs typically implemented by non-governmental organizations. But now, as you can hear here, we have the government of Kenya trying to look for the solution that is beyond the cash transfers to a long-term solution that actually teaches the project participants to fish rather than giving them the fish, and also builds their resilience, looking at multidimensional poverty and not just having a linear implementation. And so we have moved beyond delivering as non-governmental organizations to now the government actually taking this up and anchoring it within strategies or policies within the government. And when we look at this at both the national and county level, we work together with the government of Kenya to launch the ultra-poor graduation strategy that the government can use now to, as they continue thinking about how do you fund these programs at the national level, but also when you go to the county government of West Pokot or Makueni or Machakos, Taita Taveta, we have the poverty graduation strategy and policies that now the government is moving towards enacting them into law so that they can outlive any government that is in power. And so what we have seen is that now governments are actually demanding for this. As you can hear from Dr. Lynett, when you go to the county governments, we are hearing demand, like the county government of Mandera wanted the poverty graduation policy so that they can think about then how do you move that to law, and eventually putting in money and financing it. Because I think in the past we were looking up to funders such as the UK government and others, and now governments are actually saying, because of the evidence we have, we say this works, and then we want to implement, we want to invest in this. And I'm happy to say that, you heard Dr. Lynett say, funders have been funding this, but now as we move into scaling this sustainably through government structures, it is actually the government that's now putting in money to fund this because of the evidence and because also they have learned and they are now implementing it. It's no longer going to be non-governmental organization staff who are going to implement this. We have systems and structures at the government level that can take this further. And we do believe that if we were to scale this program in a sustainable way, this has to be done through governments, because then governments are able to continue this beyond funding gaps. We experienced in the non-governmental space, we experienced a huge financial crunch in the recent, in the recent past. But it doesn't matter if it's the government that's putting that in, and that's one of what is really exciting about this. The other part is that now the government has tools and structures that they are using. Like now we have the operations manual that guides the government on how to implement the program, but also learn, adapt, and scale. So it's things happen differently. I just like to conclude by saying in 2020, when you remember, and to Eduarda's point on resilience, when we started one of the programs we were implementing in the North, we started implementing it, and we were thinking about resilience and the shocks in the system. Then we had COVID. Then we didn't know what to do with it, because it was the first time that we experienced that. And before we even figured that out, if you remember, we had locusts coming in the North. And as we continued the implementation, then we had the funding crunch and other shocks and stresses that are in the system. But when we have government structures, because that's where they are, you find that governments are able to respond really quickly to such shocks and stresses to make sure that the gains are protected.
The one thing I wanted to hear about, because we also want to continue to give more stories on some of the tangible results. We saw that in the video. Thomas, what sort of tangible results are there that shows that this is having the impact, the desired outcome?
Yeah. Thank you, Yvonne. I think the tangible impact of this program is in the lives of families that we practically see change in the way women are able to feed their families. Women have been empowered and are equal partners in their own families, in making choices about their lives, as well as contributing equally to feeding their families, to progressing their families. And we have stories, some of which you've seen, of mothers who could not feed their children. Mothers or women who didn't have any assets. You saw the lady in the video there who they saw goats, or they kept they were sent to herd goats, but those goats didn't belong to them. But now with this program, you see them able to own these assets and make decisions. They contribute to the family budgets, and I think the other thing which has been mentioned here is that, based on data, we've seen this transformation of businesses that remain resilient long after the program is gone. The 25%. There are longitudinal studies that have shown that 5 years down the line, you find participants who left graduation programs 5 years down the line. They are still having economic activities and expanding and being even employers to their their neighbors' children, their own children, and they leave legacies for their children to. That is the practical outcome that we are seeing in the field, in this story, the practical stories. I think if we had more time, we could have played some of those stories so that we hear in their own words the women talk about the people living with disabilities who have been impacted. And obviously also, I think in the entire ecosystem, through the savings and loans, in Kuza Jamii program, through the savings, I think we registered almost across the 8 counties, 225 million saved by village savings and loans associations that now is in the system, and people can borrow. They can borrow to enhance their lives. They can borrow to take their children to school. They can borrow to buy assets and improve their own livelihoods. That's what we are seeing, this program actually produce in the fields, in the remotest places. I think the last thing that I would like to say is that this program changes people's, our participants' mindset. One of the things that is true is also that the economic circumstances are changing. The way businesses are done are changing. We are going more digital. You just heard, Dr. Lynett talk about digitization on the government side. The reality is that the more digital some of these services, go, without help and support, those who are in the remote areas get even more excluded because of the remoteness and because of the absence of those services. So one of the things that this program also does is to impart that knowledge to support these participants to get connected to the economy, through digital lending that they can now use to progress their own lives.
Yeah, and we're talking about lessons learned here by the government and how you're implementing those. But Eduarda, what sort of lessons from this Kuza Jamii initiative could be used to shape similar programs on the continent?
Fantastic. Thank you, Yvonne. I will actually speak about 4 lessons. The first one is actually use of evidence to prove that things work, right? So we've been talking about here, I think Thomas just said that these VSLAs, they saved 220 million. Now, look at that. What does this do? This actually is an incentive for private sector. Going back to your question about private sector, we do want private sector to be there, to be able to take these participants, households I call participants, into the next level, because we now know they have a capital. Often what is the problem for people, vulnerable people, is they have no assets, particularly women. When I go to the Northeast, that's what they tell me, right? If I go to the banker will probably not even open the door for me to come in because they know I don't have anything, right? Therefore, evidence actually shows that these things work. So that's the first one, and I'm very glad that some of this evidence actually transferred into legal framework for government, right? Because for sustainability purpose, we need systems, process, institution, and capacity of the government to take this forward. So that's the number one lesson. The second one is contextual. Right? I think all of us said it in a different way, one way or another, that this program is very much based on contextual issues. So when we are designing a program like this, we need to know that counties are different, countries are different, people are different. Even within the same county, you will have differentiators. So what this program does is actually build from the local context. So the mentors are local, the participants themselves decide what business they want to do, obviously with some kind of support in terms of market analysis, in terms of financial skills, digital skills to allow them to go forward. So that's the second one, that we cannot design a program one size fits all. That's the second one. The third point I want to speak is about partnership in this program, and being here with all of us is a great example where the UK alone could not do it. the government alone could not do it. Neither my colleagues here from different NGOs could do alone. And a part of these, we have different partners bringing different skill sets and add value into the program. So partnerships become really fundamental and bring private sector, as we were saying, right? This is not only about us. How do we incentivize private sector to join this? This is all about different types of partnerships that actually takes us forward. And then the last point I want to speak is exactly about private sector, right? As I said right at the beginning when I started responding to your question, Yvonne, we want private sector to take this forward. Right? When I will go to Wajir just because it's very recent in my mind, but I've been to many other counties and the stories are very similar, right? So when I was in Wajir and the ladies, actually was a group, there was men, so it wasn't a lady only group. They were on the VSLA, one of these groups that passes on your show earlier, they sat sitting around, they were talking about, now we have this money, so this allows us to open a bank account. They now can go to institutions and open a bank account. But like your previous interlocutor, I forgot his name, he was talking about some cooperative and money, right?
Yes. Yes.
I was saying to colleagues as we're waiting outside, that's the kind of people we want to bring to the north. We want them to know that there is an opportunity there. There is already markets. There is already funding moving around. There's already collateral, because that's the main challenge for private sector. Is infrastructure, is collateral, is access the risks, right? They need to de-risk. So to some extent, these kind of things have de-risked, right? So I think I really like that word, in fact, is de-risking this so that the private sector can take. And I really hope when I come back here again, Yvonne, in 20 years' time, and I go back to Wajir, and I will go back to Wajir, I really hope that when I go back to Wajir, I see these people really at a different stage in their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we've got just a few minutes left, I'll ask very quickly this of you, Leah. The program is looking to scale, right? So what are some of the key priorities, going forward to ensure that this continues on the trajectory that it's on?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, it is making sure that this program is systematized within the government structures and systems, and also still continuing to partner across different stakeholders. I think we have spoken into that. And so I will speak to 5 key priorities. One is learning, adapting, and continuing to learn. A few months ago, I think Dr. Lynett and I were in India, in the state of Bihar, which is one of the poorest states in India. But it has adopted this program and it works really, really well. And so some of the things that we picked from that learning visit, Daktari has already incorporated those into Kenya socioeconomic inclusion, the second phase, because as I say, this is a dynamic space that we are working in. So the first one is learning. We continue learning and not remain rigid to what worked yesterday may not work tomorrow. The second piece is I spoke into policies at the national and county levels. Most of the time, we do know that these two governments are really still government, and they work to serve the extremely poor populations, to protect the citizens of the country and any country in Africa for that reason. And so having this program embedded into law, as I said earlier, and the government funding this, rather than looking externally to funding. There is also motivation and system strengthening. As Daktari said earlier, you find that NGOs most of the time have a lot of research that we continue conducting. And sometimes, traditionally, right now things are changing quite a bit, but traditionally you find that research is done and put in the shelves. But we're increasingly seeing that this is now being put to practice to actually inform adaptations that work for the people that we serve in these communities, and continuing to collaborate with governments to ensure that as we develop this research, we do it in two folds. One, we collaborate with government to generate the evidence, but also when we are generating this evidence, this is also translated to implementation by governments. And how we do this is actually exactly how we did it in this economic inclusion program, where we did the first RCT in collaboration with the government of the Kenya the first iteration of the Kenya Socioeconomic Inclusion Program. And when it worked, what we actually saw was when we looked at the evidence, as Eduarda was saying, there was positive evidence in Mwatate, Taita Taveta and Kisumu, but it wasn't as strong in Marsabit. Yeah. And some of the lessons we drew from there were the landscape was very different. It is arid. And so those are the learnings that have been incorporated into the second iteration of the Kenya Socioeconomic Inclusion Program, where now we are thinking about additional climate resilient interventions that will be embedded into that program, so that it's not a one-size-that-fits-all. Yeah. So the role of research. And the last one is the role of non-governmental organizations in providing technical assistance to governments. It will take us years to end extreme poverty if we were to do this as non-governmental organizations. And so what works very well is translating this knowledge and capacities to government structures. We have seen this work very well, where we did, when we have been in this Kuza Jamii program, we've worked alongside the government and continued to translate this knowledge and capacities to government. And now we are feeling very confident. The government is very confident to take this up. The government of Ethiopia is actually now demanding for this economic inclusion, this type of economic inclusion program through PSNP 6. We are seeing this in the Kaduna state in Nigeria, where we are implementing similar programs. In Uganda, the parish development model. So there is demand that is being created, as Eduarda said. Kenya is the hub, and Daktari, who leads this work in Kenya, has hosted a number of governments. The Ministry of Agriculture from Ethiopia, she hosted them to come and learn from what is happening in Kenya through this economic inclusion program, so that it can be scaled. This is not a Kenya program. This is an Africa problem, but I think the solution here to lead to sustainability also is solutions that are driven by local governments. Right. And scaled by Africa, because the challenges here are very different from other geographies, and I think that's what would really drive sustainability and scale. Okay, all right. In 2 minutes, Dr. Lynett, as we conclude, what does success look like in the years to come?
When you talk of success, then I think economic inclusion is the way to go. As a government, we've already committed through our blueprint programs. We have our Vision 2030, we have our bottom-up transformation agenda, we have our social protection policy. So economic inclusion is already anchored in our policies and legislation. That is one. Two, we look at the dignity and the quality of life of our participants. And that is what is key. Because when you have poverty, then you are excluded. But when you graduate people from extreme poverty, and when we talk of graduation, we are not talking of wearing a gown. What we are talking about is that there are metrics that have been put in place. We want to see the participants have increased their income. And just like he was saying, I went to Makueni, and there is a group that had actually saved 1.2 million. You are talking of people who are earning less than 245, and now together as a group of 25 people, they've been able to increase their income to 1.2 million collectively. So that shows you that that is the transformative way to go. The graduation approach, and we want everyone at least to be able to contribute to the socioeconomic development. They benefit as well as also contribute to socioeconomic development. So for us to do this, when we are able to coordinate ourselves, coordination is very key, and institutionalization of economic inclusion is also very key. And we've also put what Leah was talking, the ultra-poor graduation strategy, where we want to have standard operating procedures so that not every organization is doing their own thing in a fragmented way.
Right.
So we have developed an ultra-poor graduation strategy. And we've also strengthened the systems. And one thing that is very key is that every process, the community is involved. Even when it comes to targeting, it is community-based validation, so that the community actually identify this person is poor. Someone will say, this person is poor, I'm poor, but this one is poorer than me. So they participate in every process, from targeting to enrollment to monitoring and evaluation. So there's a lot of transparency and accountability in this. So this is the transformative way. It is very transformational, and I think if you really want to graduate people from poverty, then the graduation methodology is the best.
Way to go.
Yeah.
Okay. We want to thank you for your time this evening and wish you the very best of luck with this program. Dr. Lynett Ochuma, Eduarda Mendonça-Gray, Thomas Kongongo, and Leah Okero on the Kuza Jamii initiative and the role it's playing in economic inclusion in the vulnerable communities across the country, and of course the lessons for the rest of the continent. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the program today, and that is where we conclude our program tonight. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next time. Good night.